It's Platt, and today we get Stone Cold. That's next to Platt's Beer of the Week. Well, we're still in the middle of Oktoberfest season, but I just saw this beer the other day, and I thought I just had to give it a try. Our particular beer today is the Broken Skull IPA. Comes to us from Segundo Brewing. This beer is a collaboration between Segundo Brewing and former professional wrestling great Stone Cold Steve Austin. Can I get a oh hell yeah? Like I said, just kind of stuck out there, had to get it. Real quick little info on Segundo Brewing. Segundo Brewing is located on Main Street in Segundo, California. Segundo is a suburb of Los Angeles. Segundo Brewing has a tap room, which right now is closed due to the pandemic, but I believe they're still allowed to do curbside pickup of things like 6-packs, growler refills. These are some of the things states have done to help these breweries, these small breweries, because the tap room is the lifeblood of a lot of those breweries. So when they shut those down, they had to give them some way to move their beer. So the tap room is still available for pickup only, but they also have at a separate location their own restaurant. It's called the Slice and Pint. It's a pizza and beer joint. So if you want your Segundo beer but would like to be inside with other humans, you can check them out at the Slice and Pint. Some of their other beers include the Grand Hill IPA, the Casa Azul Lager, the Hammerland Double IPA, the Smoky Hollow Coffee Stout, and the Old Jitty Barley Wine. Now, the second half of this collaboration, Steve Austin, a.k.a. Stone Cold Steve Austin, a.k.a. the Texas Rattlesnake, a.k.a. Stunning Steve Austin, a.k.a. the Ringmaster, former member of the Hollywood Blondes and the Stud Stable. Mr. Austin has had a ton of personas in his professional wrestling career. Steve Austin's real name is actually Steve Williams. However, at the time when he started his professional wrestling career in the late 80s, early 90s, there was already a well-established professional wrestler there in Texas known as Dr. Death Steve Williams. The bird loves Dr. Death. Anyway, Dr. Death Steve Williams already around, so it's just, and again, being in Texas and from Texas, it was just natural progression to Steve Austin. For those of you that are a wrestling fan and may remember his career, beer drinking was a huge part of his career. He was always talking about beer drinking. He was always beer drinking. I famously remember the time where he hosed down his boss, Vince McMahon, with a fire hose filled with Coors Light. I believe he drove a Coors Light beer truck to the ring and hosed down his boss in beer. He would drink beer in and out of the ring. He would dump beer on his fallen victims. He often referred to beers. One of his gags was people would throw beers into the ring for him to drink, and he'd knock them back in the ring. He would refer to them as Steve Weisers. Now, I don't remember if he actually ever had a working relationship with Budweiser. I do remember seeing times where you saw a Budweiser in his hand, but I don't know if they were ever an official sponsor. Like I remember one time him driving up with a Coors Light beer truck, so who knows? But beer drinking has always been a big part of his persona. Post-wrestling career, he's gotten into the movie field. Not quite as successful as The Rock, but he does all right. He's been in movies like The Expendables, The Longest Yard remake. He's done a little TV, Nash Bridges, had his own show called Redneck Island. I believe he's still doing his own show called Broken Skull Challenge, which is at his ranch called Broken Skull Ranch here in Texas. Basically, it's kind of like an American Ninja Warrior thing, but they go out to Texas out on a ranch or wherever, and again, help inspire the name for the beer. One last little note on Steve Austin, probably the most important one, is that he went to the same college as this guy. That's right, we are both alums of the University of North Texas. We both believe in the Mean Green. Steve's a few years older than me. I believe he's like 5-6 years older than me, so he was gone by the time I got up there. He did play college football up there. At the time, North Texas was just a 1AA school. I think it was my senior year that they moved up to Division I, but they were a little smaller college when he went there. Fellow alums also include Dr. Phil, Roy Orbison, and the guy that played RoboCop. So look at that. Well, before we try this beer, though, let's check out the stats. So I thought today, since this beer is inspired by professional wrestler, I thought I would look into beers that have been inspired by professional athletes. Now, some people will say pro wrestlers aren't professional athletes, however. They are great athletes, but I get the argument. But for entertainment purposes, we're going to lump them all in together. I know that there are some athletes like Frank Thomas that actually brew their own beer or are more heavily involved in the process. Here in Vegas, Ryan Reeves of the Golden Knights has his own beer line out. He collaborates with a local brewery. But these beers are just inspired by athletes. And I got a short little list. The first beer we're going to talk about is inspired by Peyton Manning, former NFL great. This beer was a collaboration between a brewery in Denver and a brewery in Indianapolis, and they created a beer called Omaha. Now, if you remember, Peyton in his career loved to audible in the line of scrimmage, and he would always yell Omaha. If you ever heard him Mike, he was always Omaha, Omaha, Omaha. So they created Omaha, which I thought was pretty good. The next beer we're going to talk about, I don't care what you think about the guy, good or bad. I think the beer itself, or the idea of the beer itself, is kind of funny. Great Lakes Brewing gave us a beer inspired by LeBron James. If you remember when LeBron left Cleveland the first time, there was a lot of hurt feelings about it. You know, he had the whole announcement and everything. A lot of people were really upset about it, especially if you're from Cleveland. And you might remember at the time Nike was doing an ad campaign for him where they used the term witness. Well, Great Lakes Brewing created a beer called Quitness, which again I think is pretty funny. Even if you're pro or against LeBron James, or whatever you think of LeBron James, that's a pretty funny idea for a beer. The third beer is inspired by an athlete a lot of you may or may not know depending on your age, but one of the great of all time in baseball, and that's Eddie Murray. Eddie Murray was a power-hitting first baseman for the Orioles, I believe Mets, Dodgers, and I'm pretty sure he ended his career with Cleveland. I know he played with them in the last half of his career. Eddie is, I believe, one of the few baseball players all time to ever hit 500 home runs and 3,000 hits. So he's definitely one of the greats of all time. What made Eddie great, though, was I think he's the only person with 500 home runs that never hit 40 home runs a year. He was always 34 home runs, 35, 37, 32, just year after year after year. And the fine folks at Union Craft Brewing created Steady Eddie Wheat IPA, just inspired by a guy who was just so consistent for so long. And last but not least, speaking of consistency, the great Tony Gwynn has a beer that, there was a beer inspired for him. Tony, of course, the San Diego Padre great. And San Diego being such a hotbed for craft beer, you just knew somebody was going to create a Tony Gwynn inspired beer, and the fine folks at AleSmith created 394 Pale Ale. Now, what's 394 stand for? 394 was Gwynn's batting average in 1994. That was the strike-shortened year. Tony had a real good chance to hit 400, first time since Ted Williams did in 41. Unfortunately, the major leaguers just couldn't get a labor deal done, and the season ended roughly 50 games short, and so he did not get a chance to hit 400, but 394 Ale reminds us how close he was. Well, enough talking about these beers. Let's try some Broken Skull IPA, or as Stone Cold might say, a Steve Weiser. All right, that is I'm going to say dark golden color, just maybe just a hint of copper. Yeah, a little hint of copper in there. We got a good finger and a half, nice foam. Well, yeah, the hops are there. First thing to hit your nose, but not over the top. Let's give her a try. You know what? That's nice. A nice, hoppy, medium-bodied beer. To be honest, when I first heard him reference the beer, again, knowing a little bit about the guy and his career and stuff like that, I'd always seen him with Budweisers, Miller Lights, Coors Lights, stuff like that. In some of the interviews, he did not seem like a guy that got too exotic with drinks. And I just always had gotten the vibe, well, I didn't think he was going to be too crazy on the beers. From what I gathered, the guy really does like IPAs. And this is an approachable IPA. And then now that I think about it, it does kind of work on a certain level. The guy really does like to drink, and this is a drinkable IPA. There's just some IPAs out there that maybe one or two, and again, they, now these extra IPAs and double IPAs, they get a little over the top. But this is still kind of holds true to kind of some of the original IPAs that just, well, we're an ale, but just a little more hops, a little more alcohol, and we haven't gone too over the top. This is a drinkable. This is a drinkable beer. This has not gone full West Coast IPA. I'm sure there's some Cascade hops or whatever in there, but just seems nice balance. Last couple sips starting to get a little more malt, which I like. And again, I kind of picked up, just a shade of those darker malts, just enough to add a little color, a little bit to it. Overall, nice well executed beer. This is I will say this is a pale ale, or IPA, Indian pale ale, that you could get your friends to venture to, your Bud Light, Miller Lite friends to venture to. This is a little more approachable, well executed beer. Yep, just had to have one more sip to confirm that. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Well, until next time, bottoms up.